Hey, thank you so much for the introduction, and it's really a great honor to be part of this eminent group. I'm one of the newest members of the Academy, and I think Sister Helen's words are were very comforting because it's really not my subject of studies, but I think I'm doing worse than the previous speakers. I don't have a paper. I just have some ideas, but I like to expose my weakness to all of you. So I'll share the screen. I have some course points, so you can take a look at the quotations I'm using. So the title is Physical and Moral Disabilities, Plato and Confucius on the Life Worth Living. So the previous speech is really all based on the idea of dignity and equality, and I think that's in line with the sort of mainstream account, including the teaching of the church. But Plato and early Confucians, they didn't discuss really the issue of dignity, and both sides were against equality. So as a philosopher, so I'm kind of curious, now I had this topic, how did they deal with the issue of the disabled? Do their accounts have any merits at all? So that's what I'm going to investigate in the 20 or so minutes. We know, Plato's, one of the most famous Plato's dialogues is the Republic, and the ideal city-state, ideal state in the Republic, especially books 2 to 4, are often is often said to be idealized version of Sparta, and we know, what historical Sparta was. Sparta engaged in infanticide. They killed infants that didn't look strong enough, and even if infants survived the first stage, oftentimes they were eliminated. Physically, they were eliminated if they were shown to be physically or intelligently, I wouldn't say intellectually, but because they didn't care about the intellectual activities, but just intelligently disabled. Those who were not strong enough were those who could be deceived to fall into some trap. Plato in the Republic seems to offer a kind of a theorized version of the Spartan practices. So he advocated some sort of eugenics and even euthanasia. I think in some cases even just simple murder. And also it proposed the Republic, the text proposed marriage restrictions mostly in book 3 and book 5. So in book 3, right. So in book 3, Socrates, the forever spokesperson for Plato in most of the Platonic dialogues, said that there is this model doctor, a good doctor, Asclepius, knew this unrevealed art of medicine for those whose bodies are by nature and regimen in a healthy condition, but has some distinct and definite disease in them. So medicine is only for those who has diseases that can be cured, right? But with bodies disease through and through, this model doctor made no attempt by regimens to make a lengthy and bad life for a human being and have him produce offspring likely to be such as he, on the ground that he's of no profit to himself or to the city. Therefore, in the ideal city, there's a sanction of killing by medicine and by court. They treat people slightly differently. For those who are physically terminal ill, they will be let die. They will not be cured. And then for those who have incurable sickness in the soul, the court would order them to be killed, murdered, directly. So this is the law for both the arts of medicine and judging. The law is that the law will care for those of your citizens who have good natures in body and soul. Well, as for those who haven't, they will lie die, the ones whose bodies are such and the ones whose souls have bad natures and are incurable, they themselves will kill. So that's what I talk about, lie die and actively murder. Then in book 5, Socrates said that we only sanction the most beneficial marriages, and the most beneficial means that only the best man and best woman could have intercourses and have children, and the ordinary man and woman should not have intercourses, or should have as little as possible. And if they produce children, the children will be left alone to die. And then he said that even in terms of the best man, the best woman who are guardians of the city, rulers of the city, if they go to war but they are captured alive, Socrates says they should be given as a gift to enemies. So not even any sympathy for the fellow rulers, the fellow guardians. And so that really embodies a famous slogan allegedly by a Spartan mother or wife to her soldier son or husband, when the woman presented the shield to the man. The slogan is, "Come with it or upon it. Come home with the shield or upon it." Namely, come back alive or die for the country. So that the whole picture sounds really terrible and harsh. Then what is the reason for Socrates to give such a harsh picture of how to deal with not only just the disabled, but the incompetent, the cowardly, because according to Socrates, the need if a city needs a lot of medicine, it is a sign that this city is deeply sick. So he said that there's no greater sign of a bad and base education than is needing eminent doctors and judges, not only for the common folk and the manual artisans, but also for those who pretend to have been reared in a free fashion. And so for Socrates, oftentimes illness is caused by idleness, so the fact that a city needs too many doctors means that too many citizens live idle, purposeless lives, so these citizens need medicine not because one has met with wounds or some of the seasonal maladies, but as a result of idleness and a way of life. And then he gave this example of Herodotus, a great doctor from the antiquity. So he, attending the mortal disease he had, he wasn't able to cure it, and spent his whole life treating it with no leisure for anything else, mightily distressed if he depart a bit from his accustomed regimen. So to Socrates, such a life is not really worth living, because he just tries to survive without any other purpose in his life. So that leads to his idea that what kind of life is worth living. So only the kind of life not not hindering physical and musical. By musical means learning, thought, meditation, or kind of theoretical, scholarly education. So one's life has to be able to go through physical and scholarly education, and as a result, he's profitable to himself or to the city. He gives the example of a craftsman. A craftsman had a definite job. If he couldn't do it, it wouldn't be of no profit to go on living. And then to Socrates, for all men obedient to good laws, a certain job has been assigned to each in the city at which he's compelled to work. and no one has the leisure to be sick throughout his life and treat himself. So everyone has a job, has a purpose in the city, in the state. And if one cannot do that job, then he has no purpose and his life has no worth. So again, the worth is based on the grounds that he's of no, is whether he's of profit to himself or to the city. But of course, after presenting Socrates or Plato's idea, the question is, really, is this understanding of worth or profit or use too narrow? And for that, let me turn to the Confucian side, right? From both Confucius and Mencius. So in Confucius, the Analects is a collection of a conversation between Confucius and some of his friends, acquaintances, pupils. And there is this, old friend of Confucius called Yuan Rang. And so in one passage, it's recorded that Yuan Rang sat casually with his legs spread out, waiting for Confucius. So this posture is a very impolite posture when you are receiving a guest. On seeing him, with this very impolite gesture, posture, the master remarked, "When young, you are devoid of humility and respect for your elders. When grown up, you made no contributions to the community. When growing older but now dying, you are a thief." We don't know what kind of thief Confucius was talking about. Probably a thief of resources, of the thief of the long life you, Yuan Rang, this impolite person, don't deserve. Then Confucius wrapped this impolite person on the shin with his staff. So here Confucius seems to be saying that for life to be worth living, a person has to have behave with ritual propriety, and he or she also has to contribute to society somehow. So I mean, you probably know, ritual or rites are essential to Confucius or early Confucianism, and we see this idea here. However, in another passage, Confucius said, "A man who is not humane," humane is a translation of a key concept of Confucianism, 人, and 人 sounds exactly ren sounds very similar to the Chinese word for person. So that's why the usual translation of 人 is benevolence. But personally, I like the word humane, because humane sounds similar to human. In Chinese, benevolence sounds very similar to human as well. So the master said, "A man who is not ren, who is not human, what has he to do with ritual? A man who is not human, what has he to do with music?" So ritual music are two important aspects of Confucian education, but Confucius says all these do not really matter if one doesn't have this thing called 仁 or benevolence or humaneness. So what is this humaneness? Mencius said later, and also very important Confucian thinker said, so he said every human being has a compassionate heart. If you can apply the compassionate heart to governance, you can run the world very easily. Then he basically asked himself, so how do I know that the ruler could have compassionate heart? My answer is that everyone has a compassionate heart. How does he show this? He offered what I consider one of the best thought experiments in the history of philosophy. So in order to show the universality of compassion, he said that just imagine if you suddenly see a small child who is about to fall into a well, namely who is about to be killed, right? If you suddenly see a child who is about to be killed, would you feel a sense of alarm and distress, right? And I think this is one of the best designed thought experiments because, and first of all, he used the image of a baby. I think the death of a baby is something no culture could take lightly, especially the death of their own babies. Secondly, he asked your immediate reaction. He said, if you suddenly see this, how would you react, right? So he asked your immediate reaction, not deliberate reaction. Third, he asked your emotional reaction, not not whether you are going to save the baby or not. A lot of us might not be able to save the baby for other considerations, but it's very hard to imagine anyone would not feel disturbed when seeing something like this. And as a result, Mencius concludes that for this, we can see that whoever is devoid of the heart of compassion is not human. Namely, compassion is the definitive feature of human being. If a human being, if someone who looks like a human doesn't have compassion, so a challenge to the thought experiment I just mentioned is that what about sociopaths or a psychopath, right? If a psychopath is proven not to have any compassion whatsoever, Mencius' answer would be very simple. That thing, it looks like a human, but he's not really a human, because the very definition of human is to have compassion. Without compassion, that thing that human look like is not really a human. Then he goes on to say, there are three other things that are universal among all human beings: the heart of courtesy and modesty, the heart of right and wrong, and the heart of shame. So he said these four hearts, these four emotional responses are the four beginnings or four germs, four sprouts of a full-blown human being, right? So he goes on to say that a human being has these four germs, four sprouts, four beginnings, as he or she has four limbs, possessing these four germs, but claiming one's incapability of developing them into four virtues, four full-blown virtues, is to cripple oneself. Claiming one's ruler's incapability of developing them into four full-blown virtues, and therefore of becoming a responsible, benevolent ruler, is to cripple one's ruler. If a human who possesses these four germs knows to develop them, it will be like a fire starting up or spring coming out. If one can develop it, one can tend to what is within the four seas, namely the whole world. If one cannot develop it, one cannot even serve one's parents. So if you use Mencius' metaphor, right? These four universal moral sentiments are like four limbs on a baby, right? So all of us are equal in the sense that we all have these four germs, four beginnings, four limbs, four moral limbs. And if you can develop them fully, you will be what Mencius called a great person. 大人 literally means a great person, because literally your moral limbs are great, so you are a great person. And if you fail to develop your four limbs, you are a small person. And small person in contemporary Chinese, almost like a curse word. You say someone is a small person, you just is a despicable, immoral, person. And for Mencius, that's not really a curse. That's a description, because you fail to develop your moral limbs fully, right? And so in the sense, then we can say that those who are not able to care about other human beings, including the disabled, are themselves disabled in the moral sense. So just to sum up, so for Confucians, why? Although we are not necessarily equal, although they don't talk about dignity, why can we talk about the care for the disabled? Because we care for the disabled is out of our own humaneness or benevolence, or out of our own worth of living. In order to prove our own worth of living, we have to assist those other human beings in distress. Of course, there are two kinds of people in distress. The idol, that old friend of Confucius, he can, he has no physical disability, but he has some kind of spiritual disability, right? So he should be admonished, admonished, and he should be reminded that in order to live, one has to earn the worth of living. And for the physically and mentally sick, a morally capable, able human being should help them to develop their potentials as human beings to the extent possible, and not to help the biological disabled reveals our own moral or human disability. I'll just stop here. Thank you.